Hi students, today we will learn about the ascending tracts of spinal cord and brainstem. So in this category, the first one is the fibers connecting the spinal cord with the cerebral cortex. We have two pathways. The first one is the posterior column medial lemniscus pathway and second one is the spinothalamic pathways, which again has anterolateral, dorsolateral and spinocervicothalamic pathways. So first one, posterior column medial lemniscus pathway. So here you can see from the mechanosensory receptors which are arising from the lower parts of the body, these fibers will travel through dorsal root ganglion and they will come to the spinal cord. Then they will ascend up and they will form gracile tract. And from the mechanosensory receptors from the upper part of the body, they will form cuneate tract. And these tracts will end in the caudal part of the medulla. So up to this, that is from the periphery to the relaying station at the caudal part of the medulla, these are the first order neurons. Then here in the caudal part of the medulla, we have gracile and cuneate nucleus. So they will synapse there and they will form second order neurons which will cross in the caudal part of the medulla and form the internal arcuate fibers. And they will ascend up and they will come up to the thalamus. So up to the thalamus, this whole thing is second order neuron. From the thalamus, the third order neuron will arise and they will end in the primary somatic sensory cortex area. So in the thalamus, they will relay in the VPL nucleus, that is ventro-posterolateral nucleus of the thalamus. So when it comes to the face, from the mechanosensory receptors from the face, the trigeminal nerve through the trigeminal ganglion and up to the principal nucleus of the trigeminal complex, it forms the first order neuron and the second order neuron will arise, okay, and it will cross and it will ascend through trigeminothalamic tract or trigeminal lemniscus and it will relay in the VPM nucleus of the thalamus, that is ventro-posteromedial nucleus of the thalamus. Then third order neuron will arise and it will end in the primary somatic sensory cortex. So here you can see this is the primary somatic sensory cortex or S1. Okay, this is the thalamus. This is the secondary somatic sensory cortex S2. This is posterior parietal cortex. It's okay. So here you can see this thalamus, the cross section of the thalamus, the VPM ventroposteromedial nucleus, and this is ventroposterolateral nucleus. So this is VPL nucleus, this is VPM nucleus. From there the fibers will go to primary somatic sensory cortex S1. Okay. So here also you can see dorsal column system when compared to spinothalamic tract. What is the difference? So in this figure I want to show this difference. So here of the first order neurons will come and in the medulla they will end and second order neurons will be crossing. Okay, but when comes to spinothalamic tract, okay, the second order neurons will start in the spinal cord only and they will cross and they will ascend. Okay, so this is the difference. So coming to its course. Okay, so the first order neuron, okay, it lies in the cell body of the dorsal root ganglia and it is pseudo-unipolar neuron. So the dorsal root ganglia and its neuron, it is an example of pseudo-unipolar neuron. So the first order neuron is a pseudo-unipolar neuron. So we are talking posterior column medial lemniscus pathway. Okay. So the first order neuron, the cell body lies in the dorsal root ganglia, and it is an example of pseudo-unipolar neuron. So it carries sensations from all these things. So from tactile mechanoreceptors. So from the Meissner's corpuscles, it carries the fine touch and 2-point discrimination, and from free nerve endings which are around the hair follicle, it carries the fine touch, and from Pacinian corpuscles, it carries a pressure and vibration sense. So these are the tactile mechanoreceptors. So it carries the fine touch, 2-point discrimination, pressure and vibration sense. And it also carries conscious proprioception from the muscle spindles and Golgi tendon organs. Now, second order neurons starts from both the nucleus cuneatus and nucleus gracilis in the medulla. So these axons of the second order neuron from the gracilis and cuneatus nuclei, these axons are called internal arcuate fibers. These will cross at the level of medulla and forms the medial lemniscus, and this medial lemniscus travels through the brainstem, okay, with a preserved somatotopic arrangement. So the somatotopy is not at all changing. Means the fibers which are coming from the lower part of the body are in the medial region, and from the upper part of the body they are in the lateral region. Then the medial lemniscus terminates and synapses in the VPL nucleus, that is ventro-posterolateral nucleus of the thalamus, with the preservation of the somatotopy. Then from the VPL nucleus, the third order neurons will arise and they will project laterally out of the thalamus, and the course somatotopically through the posterior limb of the internal capsule. So they will go through the posterior limb of the internal capsule, and they terminate in the primary somatosensory cortex, that is S1 of the postcentral gyrus. Okay, primary somatosensory cortex of the postcentral gyrus. So here you can see about the primary somatosensory cortex. So the primary somatosensory cortex, where it is located? It is located in the anterior part of the parietal lobe, where it constitutes the postcentral gyrus. Okay. So here you can see it is a map of human cerebral cortex. Okay. So this cerebral cortex is divided approximately 50 distinct areas by Brodmann. So we call them as Brodmann's areas. So he divided this thing based on the histological and structural differences. Okay. So areas 1, 2, 3. These three areas will constitute the primary somatosensory area 1. So here you can see this is the 1, this is the 2, and this is the 3. So this whole thing is the primary somatosensory area 1. Okay. Whereas 40 is the secondary somatosensory area 2. Okay. This is 40. And 5 and 7. 5 and 7A and 7B. These are the somatosensory association areas. Somatosensory association areas. I repeat. So areas 1, 2, 3 are the primary somatosensory area 1. Area 40 is the secondary somatosensory area 2, and area 5 and 7 are the somatosensory association areas. Okay. So you can see here the primary somatosensory cortex, it consists of the Brodmann areas 1, 2, 3. In that also 3A and 3B. Okay. So areas 3B and 1. So the first one and last one. Area 3B and 1 receive cutaneous tactile input. and 3A and 2 receives proprioceptive input. So these are the areas in the primary somatosensory cortex which receives the information from various parts of the body. Then what is its function? So to convey sensory information regarding the fine touch, 2-point discrimination, conscious proprioception and vibration sensations from the skin and joints excluding the head. So this is the function of the posterior column medial lemniscus pathway. And the dorsal column nuclei also transmits visceral nociceptive information to the contralateral ventroposterolateral thalamic nucleus, which in turn relays the information to the somatosensory cerebral cortex. Okay, so the dorsal column nuclei also transmits the visceral nociceptive information to the contralateral VPL. So these are the two functions. Blood supply, it is supplied by the posterior spinal artery. Okay, it supplies the posterior column pathway, posterior spinal artery. So you can see here what is pseudo-unipolar neuron. The first order neuron is pseudo-unipolar neuron. Okay, so what it has, with it is having a single axon arising from the cell body. Then it splits into two branches. Okay, so this is the cell body. First a single axon arises, then it splits into two branches. Here you can see the second figure, it is a bipolar neuron. Okay, so the body is situated in the dorsal root ganglion with one axon traveling peripherally. Here we are describing the pseudo-unipolar neuron. This is pseudo-unipolar neuron, this is bipolar neuron. What is the difference? I already explained. Okay, so here in the pseudo-unipolar neuron, first a single axon arises and it will split. Here that is different. Okay, the axon is here and the dendrites are here. Here the pseudo-unipolar neuron, the body where it is present in the DRG, that is dorsal root ganglion, with one axon traveling peripherally to the tissue and another axon will travels into the dorsal column. Okay, and this is the bipolar neuron. Then coming to fasciculus cuneatus and fasciculus gracilis. So the fasciculus cuneatus, it is also called as tract of Burzard. It is named after the scientist Carl Friedrich Burzard. And second one is the fasciculus gracilis or the tract of Gall. It is named after the scientist Friedrich Gall. Okay. Then comes to the comma tract of Sludge or fasciculus interfascicularis. It is based on the scientist Friedrich Sludge. So what is this comma tract of Sludge? Okay, comma tract or fasciculus interfascicularis. It is also known as fasciculus interfascicularis. It is situated between the tracts of Gall and Burda. Okay, it is situated in between these two tracts. This tract is formed by short descending fibers which are arising from the medial division of the posterior nerve root. Okay, these fibers are also considered as the descending branches of the tracts of Gall and Bursa. It is nothing but some branches of the Gall and Bursa will descend down and they will form the comma tract of Sludge. What is this function? So the function is to establish the intersegmental communications and to form short reflex arc. So there are two functions. It will form the short reflex arc and it will establish the intersegmental communication. Then comes the spinothalamic pathways. So we have finished one pathway which is connecting the spinal cord with the cerebral cortex, that is the posterior column medial lemniscus pathway. So here you should draw diagram and you should draw flow chart. In that you should start with the course, means where it is starting, where the first order neuron is starting and from where from which receptors it is taking the information and what kind of information it is taking, and then the second order neuron where it is starting and where it is ending, and specifically you should mention about the internal arcuate fibers and medial lemniscus and the nucleus of the thalamus. What is the nucleus of the thalamus? Then about the third order neuron, then about the primary somatosensory cortex, the areas, okay, and you can draw a small diagram also, and what is the function of this tract. Then comes the second tract, spinothalamic pathway. In that we have anterolateral, dorsolateral and spino-cervicothalamic pathways. So you can see the pain and temperature which are carried from the various parts of the body, they will form, they will cross at the level of spinal cord only. Okay, uh, the first order neuron will be up to this level, that is up to gray matter of the spinal cord. Then the second order neuron will start and it will cross the midline and they will form the anterior spinothalamic tract or anterolateral tract and lateral or dorsolateral tract, and they will form the spinal lemniscus, and they will the second order neuron will end in the thalamus and the third order neuron will form and it will end in the cerebral cortex. So the information from the trunk and limbs is carried to the sensory cortex and the cerebellum. So it gives the information to the cerebellum also, not only to the sensory cortex. So two systems ascend to the cerebral cortex. What are those systems? Dorsal column medial lemniscus system and the anterolateral system. So in the anterolateral system, you have spinothalamic tract, spinoreticular tract and spinomesencephalic tract. So these two systems ascend to the cerebral cortex. So once again repeating, dorsal column medial lemniscal and anterolateral system. So anterolateral system consists of spinothalamic tract, spinoreticular and spinomesencephalic tracts. So here the first order neurons, these will carry the information regarding the pain, thermal sensation, crude touch and pressure. Okay. And these primary afferent neurons, these are called the nociceptive neurons. These can be divided into four main modalities, that is mechanonociceptors. So they will detect the pressure. Thermal nociceptors means temperature, and chemically sensitive nociceptors. Okay, they will be sensitive to chemicals, or polymodal nociceptors. Their cell bodies reside in the dorsal root ganglion and synapse onto second order neurons located within the posterior gray horn of the spinal cord. Okay, so this is the main difference. So second order neurons will start, okay, in the posterior gray horn of the spinal cord, and they will cross, okay, they will cross or decussate via the ventral commissure at the same segmental level. Then the second order neurons will ascend up to the spinal cord anterolaterally, known as the spinothalamic tract. As it enters the head region, it is joined by trigeminal afferents also, okay, as well as accompanying the medial lemniscus pathway. The second order neurons then synapse with the third order neurons in the thalamus, particularly where? In the VPL, that is ventro-posterolateral nucleus of the thalamus. Third order neurons project from the thalamus to the primary somatosensory cortex. What is the function? Here, they will carry information from the mechanoreceptors. So, these are the A delta fibers which are fast transmitting and responds to pressure and tissue damaging stimuli. And they will carry information from the thermal nociceptors which are unmyelinated slow conducting C fibers. They will be activated when the temperature exceeds 45 degrees. And chemically sensitive nociceptors, There are also C fibers, slow conducting. They will be activated to the pH and irritants. And polymodal nociceptors. They are the most abundant nociceptors. They will be responding to the thermal, mechanical and chemical stimuli. They are also having slow conducting C fibers. So from the mechanoceptors, thermal, chemically sensitive nociceptors, polymodal nociceptors, the information will be coming. Tract of Lichier or fasciculus dorsolateralis. So this is the Lichier's tract. The posterolateral tract of Lichier refers to those segments of the axons of first order neurons in the spinothalamic neuronal pathway which ascend and descend in the apex of the posterior gray column of the spinal cord prior to synapsing with the cell bodies of the second order neurons in the posterior gray column. So these are the first order neurons. Here they should be synapsing with the second order neurons, but some fibers will ascend up or ascend down in the spinal cord and they will form the tract of Lichier or fasciculus dorsolateralis. Then comes to ascending tracts ending in the brainstem. Okay. So some tracts will end in the brainstem. What are those tracts? Spino-reticular tract, spinotectal tract, spino-olivary tract. So here you can see spino-reticular tract. So from the spinal cord to the reticular formation. So the reticular formation is present in the medulla and pons also. Okay. So they will end in the they will form the spino-reticular tract. The spino-reticular tract is one of the three tracts that make up the anterolateral system, the system which is responsible for pain. The other two are the spinothalamic tract and spinotectal tract. This tract is very much helpful for the alertness of the individual. Spinotectal tract. From the spinal cord to the tectum, that is superior colliculus in the midbrain. Okay. So why it is important? It is involved in the reflexive turning of the head and eyes toward a point of cutaneous stimulation. Then comes the spino-olivary tract. So from the spinal cord to the olivary nucleus. Why this is important? It contributes to the movement and coordination associated primarily with the balance. Okay, so it is primarily involved in the balance, spino-olivary tract. So it conveys sensory information to the cerebellum. Okay, fibers will arise at all levels of the spinal cord. Then comes spinocerebellar tracts. There are four spinocerebellar tracts. Ventral or anterior or Gover's tract, dorsal or posterior or flexix tract, cuneo-cerebellar and rostral cerebellar. Here you can see these tracts. Ventral spinocerebellar tract from the spinal cord to the cerebellum. So this blue colored one. So this is the first order neuron, then synapsing with the second order neuron, then crossing at the same level of the spinal cord. Then it is going through the superior cerebellar peduncle to the cerebellum. Okay. Then again it will cross there and goes to the same side. That is from here to here it is coming. From there also it will cross and supply to the same side of the cerebellum actually. Then comes the dorsal spinocerebellar tract. It won't cross. This red one is the dorsal spinocerebellar tract. This is the first order neuron. This is the second order neuron. And it will go through inferior cerebellar peduncle to the cerebellum. Then comes cuneo-cerebellar fibers. Okay. So first this green one, the first order neuron will come and it will synapse in the accessory cuneate nucleus. And the second order neuron will go through inferior cerebellar peduncle to the cerebellum. Okay. So here you can see the dorsal or posterior spinocerebellar tract. Okay. The it carries information mainly from the muscle spindle and Golgi tendon organs. Okay. It it supplies the ipsilateral caudal aspect of the body and legs. Whereas the ventral or anterior spinocerebellar tract, it carries information mainly from the Golgi tendon organ and it supplies the ipsilateral caudal aspect of body and legs. Okay. Then cuneo-cerebellar tract, it carries information from the muscle, spindle and Golgi tendon organs and the region of innervation is the ipsilateral arm. Whereas the rostral spinocerebellar tract, it carries information from the Golgi tendon organs from the ipsilateral arm. Then it is an overview. So the important tracts are kept here. So the first tract is fasciculus gracilis and fasciculus cuneatus. Where it is located? The posterior white column of the spinal cord. It is originated from the dorsal root ganglia of the spinal nerves of the same side. It terminates in the nucleus gracilis and nucleus cuneatus in the middle of the same side. What is its function? It carries joint sense, vibration sense, 2-point discrimination, stereognosis and conscious kinesthesia. And whereas spinothalamic tracts, we have lateral and anterior. Mainly, the lateral is located in the lateral white column. Anterior is located in the anterior white column. The origin is posterior horn cells of the spinal cord of the opposite side. Okay. Then it will terminate in the VPL nucleus. It carries pain and temperature from the opposite side of the body, mainly lateral spinothalamic tract carries pain and temperature. The anterior spinothalamic tract will carry light touch, pressure, tickle, itch sensations from the opposite side of the body. Next come to spinotectal tract. It is present in the lateral white column. Okay. The origin is posterior horn cells of the spinal cord of the opposite side. So its termination will be to the superior colliculus of tectum of midbrain. It is for visuomotor reflexes, means head and eye movements towards the source of stimulation. Then comes the spinocerebellar tracts, anterior and posterior mainly. So they are located in the lateral white column and they are from the posterior horn cells of the spinal cord of the same side. They will be terminating in the cerebellum. They will carry unconscious kinesthesia, that is unconscious proprioception. The next video will be on descending tracts.